This video's advice of the day is, when clouded and doubted your own art, look to others and see what they make of it. It's important to receive feedback. Whenever the works of E.C. Segar are discussed ironically, it seems Thimble Theatre itself tends to not really be discussed as thoroughly as it should be. Sure, it does not help that a lot of the dailies and Sundays aren't exactly readily available to read up in some Vinyl collected series, but thanks to this Popeye fan wiki, there's just about enough information to piece together a general idea of how the series evolved, all before Popeye's introduction missed an important arc in the series. Before we dive in, do know the theater in Thimble Theatre is spelled with an R before the E. I tell you this as that's how it's supposed to be spelled. Even hired comic artists mix this up too. It was called Thimble Theatre till the 1930s when it was just renamed to Thimble Theatre starring Popeye. Wasn't changed to Popeye till years long after Segar died, that in the 1970s it got retitled to just Popeye. Along with the Popeye Fandom Wiki, Thimble Theatre and the pre-Popeye comics by E.C. Segar has been a great source for putting together this video, as the book has an article or two that give a great background behind them. Even if, unfortunately, it doesn't go enough into Thimble Theatre itself. So we first begin by talking about the man himself, E.C. Segar. Elsley Cressley Segar was born on December 8, 1894, on a farm in Chester, Illinois, near Chicago, to an American family. At age 10 was when he began to draw. He had a knack for it. It was at age 12 he worked his first job for 50 cents a day at the Chester Opera House, a local center for entertainment and culture. He'd put up posters and draw show bills to display. Eventually he worked his way up to an official movie projectionist where he worked at, breaking the films by hand. His employer at this time likely played an influence to shaping the character Wimpy, as Segar liked to model a number of his characters based on people he knew. It's a good thing to draw from your own experiences and people you know. Just don't make it too autobiographical is all when it comes to it. He was also sending in cartoons to a local paper and Life magazine that were rejected. He soon enrolled in the W.L. Evans Correspondence course in cartooning for 18 months, and after completing it in early 1916, packed his things to move to Chicago. His first job was on the Chicago Herald, taking over Stuart Crothers on Charlie Chaplin's comic capers. He drew the dailies from February 28th to July 16th, 1916, and the Sundays from March 12th to September 16th, 1917. It was after the Sundays ended for this comic that he began Barry the Boob, another pre-Thimble Theatre comic. Eventually, though, he lost his job from the Chicago Herald from it being merged with Chicago Examiner to make the Chicago Herald an Examiner. He did soon enough land a job at the Chicago American by a letter, and was ordered to do his daily series that wound up becoming Looping the Loop, which is where his cigar signature formed into existence. It shares a number of elements that early Thimble Theatre would sport, particularly the film aspects. Eventually his boss took notice of his work and had him head off for a train to work at Hertz, New York offices. He was to meet Wex Jones. Wex had known of his comics featuring such movie elements, which is what led him to give him the title, Thimble Theatre. Around this time, King Features had wanted to do more strips that had film elements, wanting to rival the likes of Ed Whelan's Minute Movies. King Features also had Film Fables, another cinema-centered comic strip by Chester Gould. And so that's how Thimble Theatre came to be. At first, it very much was about film, really playing into those aspects by having characters play roles and calling each other by different names. This was only for a short time, as it was soon enough dropped. Characters instead being more themselves rather than playing parts. When it comes to the cast of characters in the 1920s for this comic, Ham Gravy is the one you hear about a lot, and all you need to know early on is that while he somewhat was indeed the focus, it was more like he'd play off of his sweetie Olive Oil and soon enough her brother Castor Oil. The three basically became some sort of trio. Castor in particular evolved interestingly. Early on he was more of a silly Billy coming up and pulling weird ideas. Over time he got some wits and tended to outsmart people. Regardless, he always played off of Ham Gravy fantastically, showing the two have a great chemistry. The way they act with one another, it just reminds me of comedy acts of the time. The strip eventually got Sundays beginning on January 25th, 1925. It was in 1926, though, that the Sunday pages got topper strips, which is where Sapo came into play. He originally came about when management noticed how much free time Segar had in his hands and decided it'd be best he produced a second comic strip, which became the 515, which is where Sapo and his wife Myrtle came to be. It lasted from February 9th, 1921 to February 17th, 1925. So it had been a year of absence prior to Segar bringing him back for these topper strip for the Sundays. Eventually, the comic steered away from solely gag-a-day to a more overarching storylines that span dailies, essentially becoming story arcs. This is something that Segar was spectacular at. It's unfortunate, say for the Dice Island arc, that we do not really have enough or much of what he did for this decade of the comic. We just know he evolved for sure, like when Castor ended up getting a wife, which led to the other oils and ham gravy slowly but surely getting the shaft. And for more than a year there, it was Castor as the main lead, him, his wife, Celinda, and his father-in-law, I Can't Afford Lots, which he played off with fantastically. Pure speculation on my part, as it seems to me Segar had a change of heart and wanted to return to that original cast, as Celinda and her dad would be phased out, Ham Gravy returning to the dailies as a dirty bum. It dived right into the first major arc Ham had been heavily involved with in nearly a year, being about Ham reintegrating into society all while chasing after a rich lady for her money, and the following second arc being the Dice Island arc. There is some confusion I do want to clarify regarding this period of Thimble Theatre, since it bothers me a bit, which is that Ham Gravy never had a formal leave in the comics. He just gradually disappeared in the strips, in the dailies, whereas in the Sundays he went out of town and he never came back. He was never mentioned again. It would have been nice if Ham got a proper exit or in general evolved naturally to be more of a character that crops up here and there. Same with Castor, who unfortunately in his later appearances was written out by becoming a detective, and in his last appearance it's basically hardly recognizable to the character we knew in the 1920s. It's unfortunate how I had written off Ham Gravy is when I'd say he's a charming and funny guy. Honestly, if Segar lived a long life, I'm positive Ham Gravy and Castor would have made more of a proper reintroduction into the comics, setting up businesses that fail, as that is something they did do in the Sundays too. Segar probably most likely too would have also made more of an effort to have his Thimble Theatre comics better preserved, as now there's hardly or of any volumized collection for the dailies and Sundays. And it's a shame how far too early he passed away. He was only 43. Wikipedia doesn't seem to cite it, but the man did have a wife and 2 kids, his daughter Murray, born in 1922, and son Tom in 1930. There's plenty I left out, such as most of my own thoughts, as overall, I consider this video to just be a starting point. I absolutely encourage anyone interested in the works of E.C. Segar, or the man himself, to check him out. There's the recent reprints of the Popeye Sundays, but also the Thimble Theatre book I mentioned, that has plenty to read regarding Segar himself and the Sundays. I hope my interest and admiration for the cartoonist has come across fairly well. As artists, they're also cartoonists. Thank you for watching and have a good day.